Two stretches of still water sit side by side. One gets called a lake, the other a pond. Yet measure them, and the pond turns out deeper. Nobody has to follow a rule when naming water, which is exactly where the confusion starts. Most people assume a lake is just a big pond, and that instinct isn't wrong. Water labeled a lake is usually larger or deeper than water, called a pond. The problem is that usually is as firm as the naming convention ever gets. One popular attempt draws a line at 10 acres. Anything bigger counts as a lake, anything smaller as a pond. It sounds tidy on paper, and plenty of textbooks repeat it. Step outside, and the line dissolves almost immediately. New Hampshire makes the point better than any rulebook. Across the state, you'll find ponds that are wider and deeper than water bodies, named lakes just down the road. The acreage rule was broken before anyone bothered to write it down. If size won't settle it, light might. The distinction drawn most often has to do with how far sunlight reaches. In a pond, light touches the entire bottom. In a lake, parts of the floor sit in permanent darkness. That sunlight does real work. Because it reaches every corner of a pond's floor, rooted plants can grow across the whole basin rather than only along the edges. The entire body sits in what's called the photic zone, the sunlit layer. Lakes behave differently below the surface. They're larger, often murkier, and deep enough that the lowest layers never see a ray of sun. Down there, the water stays cold and dim year-round, a zone no rooted plant could ever colonize. Some draw the line by where the water comes from. A lake is usually fed by something flowing in, a river or a spring that keeps it topped up. A classic pond, by contrast, often relies on little more than rainfall. Then there's the wind. A pond's surface barely ripples, sheltered and small. On a lake, with more open space for wind to build across, waves can rise a full foot high, enough to rock a small boat. Scale changes the physics. Depth shapes something subtler too. Turnover. A lake runs deep enough that its layers flip over twice a year, once in late fall, again in spring, mixing oxygen and nutrients top to bottom. Many ponds are too shallow to turn over at all. None of this stops names from breaking every rule. The Great Salt Lake in Utah isn't even fresh water. Walden Pond in Massachusetts, made famous by the writer who lived beside it, is far deeper than plenty of water bodies proudly called lakes. Scientists who study inland waters are called limnologists, and even they can't hand you a clean dividing line. What they can describe is a gradient: shallow, sunlit, rain-fed water at one end, deep and layered water at the other, with endless overlap between. The fuzziness isn't harmless. Without an agreed, evidence-based definition, scientists struggle to compare studies, and lawmakers struggle to protect these waters. A pond can fall through legal gaps that would have shielded the very same basin had someone labeled it a lake. So if you want a rule that actually holds, forget acreage and watch the light. Can sunlight reach the bottom everywhere, letting plants grow across the whole floor? You're likely looking at a pond. Permanent dark depths point toward a lake. Still, the next pond you pass might be deeper than the lake beyond the hill, and both names could be wrong by every measure but habit. We mapped the water long before we understood it, and the labels once stuck rarely come loose.